G'day folks, Crafty Corbett here. I just thought I'd show you a quick way to make better control horns for radio control. This is a little, I don't know, $10 glider from AliExpress, and I'm just converting it over to RC. And you can see that I've done one of the control horns already. I thought I'd show you how I'm going to do this one for the rudder. Tools you'll need for this: a little craft knife, some sort of marker pen, a heating device. There's a lighter here which you can do it with. I like to use a little mini heat gun, a sturdy pair of scissors and a drill. The other thing you'll need is a jam jar lid, good sturdy plastic. The first thing we'll do is just cut out around the perimeter of the jam jar lid just to get the edge off. And it's easy to hurt yourself doing this, so be careful. If you try and put the blade straight down, then you'll find that you're trying to put the width of the blade into the plastic, and that's going to be hard work. But if you cant the blade over, then you'll find that the surface that you want to cut out lifts up and the rim pushes down, and that will make it much easier. Make sure you're always cutting away from yourself, so if anything does go horribly wrong, then you won't cut yourself. Okay, now we've got that, just going to draw out your control horn. Now, one thing to remember with your control horns is that you want the holes of your control horn to line up with the pivot point of your control surface. It's really tempting to put them up here, and that's behind the pivot point, and that won't really end up in quite as nice a movement. It'll end up with an imbalance of either up or down depending on which side you are. So make sure that that line of holes is in line with that, and because of that we want to step the control horn forward so that where we're going to attach it to the control surface is behind where we're going to attach it to the control rod. Use a sturdy pair of scissors to cut it out. Anything that's not a straight line, I like to cut slightly away and come back to it later. It's quite difficult to cut a curve accurately when you've got so much plastic around it. So if you come fairly close and then do the final cut later, you'll find that the offcut peels away on your scissors much easier. And you'll do a much nicer job of that curve. This inside corner is going to be a wee bit tricky, so we'll come somewhere close and then do the other cut, and we'll just break that off. We can finish that off later with the craft knife. The next two cuts you want to make are to divide the tongue into three, and you want to leave yourself a bit of relief, so a bit of gap between here and here. Open your scissors up as far as you can when you get close to the end, and that'll end up in a much more of the cut getting to the line, whereas if you're here you can see the angle that will be inside the plastic just here will be a lot longer. Whereas if you open the scissors right up, that gap gets much smaller, so you'll do a nicer cut towards the end. So just as you get to this point here, open your scissors right up and you'll get much closer to where you want to go. Okay, at this point, because everything's still flat, it's a good idea to mark out and drill your holes. I like to start with a central and then divide the rest, giving myself 5 positions. Once I know which one works for the model, I'll trim the rest off. So now you just got to drill it. I'm lucky enough to have a drill press, so I'll go off screen and do that, but you can totally do this with a drill. Once you've done your holes, take your craft knife and just run down the holes and lift off the burrs, particularly on the back side. And give those holes a wee clean up. Once you've got the holes all nice, now's a good time just to take off that front edge. This is not necessary, but it does make the final product look a bit nicer. It also helps the control rod not catch. I also like to take off these corners. Okay, the next job is to heat up these two and get them to bend, one way, one the other. You can use a lighter or you can use a little heat gun and get them bent up. I'll show you what that looks like once I've done it. I like to use a pair of pliers and just crush that bend. I'm going to bend it right up here, too far away, making sure that everything stays nice and parallel. And once you've got that and it's cooled down a little bit, then you can bring them back down and find that 90-degree mark. Okay, those two you can trim. I like to leave about 8 mm or so. That last one, we're going to need it to cut through the foam, so I'm just going to take the edge off here and sharpen that into a little chisel point. Okay, that's that bit done. The next bit is to move on to your model. Have a look at where your control rod is going to go and attach, and that needs to be again right next to the pivot point of your control surface. So these holes are going to want to line up with that. So mark it out where you're going to be. We know it's going to be there. And then a little line following your control horn. Then you know what sort of angle to set it at. This isn't ideal here. Really, you want your control rod perpendicular to the hinge line, which would actually be slightly above positive for my model. But that's not going to be possible. So I might reshape this a little bit and give it a wee curve. But of course, you're going to lose a little bit of that rigidity in your push rod. So it's a bit of a balance between the two. Now you know where it's going to be. Take your knife and just pop a slot as best you can all the way through your control surface. Use that chisel tip to find its way through and push it through the other side. Now you can see that those holes line up with the fulcrum point on your control surface. The next thing we're going to do is mark out the back there where that next bend is going to be, because we're going to bend this flat. I don't need it to be that long. I'm going to trim it to about 8mm or so past that point. I'm just going to put a little scratch there so that I know, just using that back edge of my blade there, and you can see that wee scratch there. Now that scratch is going to help it bend at the right point. Now depending on which plastic you've got, you might find issues with brittle plastic snapping there. So again, it's probably a good idea to heat that, unlike I did. Straighten it back out again, pop the control rod through, but this time we're just going to leave it until it's just poking out the other side. Okay, the glue gun's heated up and ready. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this surface so that when I do drop it through, the glue sinks down into that hole as much as I can. So plenty around the base here so that it drags it through with it. And obviously we want a little bit under this one and a little bit under here as well. To stop those tails coming off on your glue gun, if you just do a wee circle just before you lift your gun, you'll find, or go backwards and forwards, you'll find that you don't get those little wisps come off. Pop that through and it'll drag that glue through with it. And now you want to push those two little surfaces down and make sure they're going to get good and stuck. It's a bit tricky when there's two of them. And you can use a wet finger as well, just to help that glue go off a little bit quicker. Once we're there, we can do the other side. And again, we're just going to put a little bit underneath that tab. Draw a little circle to get rid of those little hairs. And push that tab down into it. A wet finger just helps that be a little bit more aerodynamic. And that's it. You've got yourself a nice control horn. Lots of adjustment. And there we have it. If you are going to use this method here, I recommend just bending the tip of this one that holds it in up just a fraction if it starts rubbing on this surface. Another thing you can do is just put a little curve around it. It causes a tiny bit more friction, but it does make putting them on and off a lot easier. This model I'm wanting to take on my motorbike, and so I want it to fit in a backpack. And for that reason, it's quite important to have these removable, because now I can take the same surfaces out and pack it up really small. So that's it. A better way to do DIY control horns. Good luck. If you've got any more suggestions, do let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next one.